Assalamualaikum guys. I was wondering where you were. Come on in. Today's episode is going to be on Sufism. So what is Sufism? Sufism is essentially when you let go of all your worldly desires and purify your soul. In another way, you can also say that it's a way for people to get closer to God through spiritual learning. Now today we're going to be talking about the similarities in between Rumi and Shah Abdul Latif Bhittai. So let's get into it.
So today I'll be telling you about Rumi.
Who is Rumi?
Let me tell you. So Rumi was a 13th century mystical poet and an Islamic scholar who lived in Turkey. He's only one of two influential figures that we'll be talking about today.
Oh, hello. Allow me to teach you the story of how Rumi began his spiritual journey. It began on a day when he was selling books at a bazaar. You see, at that time, Rumi was around his 30s, and he was known to be a man of knowledge, a man who studied sciences, nature, natural sciences. And so that day, he was selling books that he had written, books on science, and a man who looked to be of perhaps the stature of a beggar came up to him and asked, what is this? What are you selling? And to which Rumi replied, not something that you would understand. To this, the man took the books that Rumi was selling and threw them into the water. Rumi was, of course, angry and was like, you know, why would you do that? To which Shams simply took the books out of the water to reveal that they were dry, perfectly dry, without a drop on them. This shocked Rumi to the point where he asked the man how he had done that, and the man, who is Shams, the man who would become Rumi's teacher, replied, it's not something you would understand. This is how the first interaction between Rumi and Shams went, and how they went on to become student and teacher. And it serves as a lesson as to how those spiritual icons that we hold to great standards started their journeys at points very similar to ours. How they built themselves up from the ground to the knowledge that we know them to have, and the knowledge that we could acquire.
Who is the other one?
The next person that we're going to be talking about is Shah Abdul Latif Bhittai. He was a mystical poet from the 17th century from Sindh, Pakistan, and although he came afterwards, his work was very similar to that of Rumi's. Let's take a look at some of his work.
So today I will be telling you guys about how Shah Abdul Latif Bhittai got his name. So pretty much he would usually travel with mystics or Sufis, and he would do this because he was searching for the truth and answers for his questions. And he ended up inhabiting this one place that was a very sandy hill, and this is called a bit. And he would usually stay at that hill to meditate, and that's how he got his name, Bhittai. So after that, he gathered all of his disciples to create a mosque, which he stayed inside of.
Now that we have some background on what we're going to be talking about today and who we're going to be talking about today, I'd love to share a quote by Shah Abdul Latif Bhittai in Sindhi. So the quote goes something like, Kar tariqat takyo shariyat sunyan, yo hakikat hiratu mag marfatanyar, hoit sabuti sarn the pusar kha palura. What do you guys think that means? Alright, so I'm going to translate it a sentence at a time in English and help you guys understand it better. The first sentence means, find a qualified mystic or scholar to follow and trust. And I'd like to pass it on to Ursulan to explain his experience meeting that mystic scholar.
Thank you for inviting me to speak, Eric. The first time I met Hazrat Father Samsuddin Azimi, I came to understand how thin the line between admiration and fear really is. With only a glance at me, he recognized my nature as someone who overthinks and comments as such. I previously had a fascination with stories as a way to experience reality, to which he suggested I instead take an interest in reality as opposed to the stories born ultimately out of fantasy. To pursue that, he advised that I read and pay proper attention to the teachings of the Quran, and I try my best to pursue that advice to this day.
Alright, so I just want to say thank you so much for sharing that experience. It's something that we can all learn from, and it actually goes really well with the next sentence of the quote. And it says to let your heart follow the teachings of your scholar, which is kind of what Ursula here mentioned, and to follow those teachings fully and unconditionally. The next sentence says that following these teachings will help you reach new heights and that closeness to God that we continuously seek. And lastly, the quote finishes off with, as long as your mystic is with you in a strong handhold, you won't even get wet when you're in water. So what do you think that means, not to get wet when you're in water?
Well, I would say it means that you're kind of protected in a bubble almost, where no harm can reach you.
Yeah, exactly that. So it means to be protected from sins in a corrupt world. Now I want to share a quote, a similar quote by Rumi, and then we're going to just have a little discussion about it. So the quote is, and this is a translation, by the way, because the quote is in Farsi,
Where no harm can reach you.
yeah, exactly that. So it means to be protected from sins in a corrupt world. Now I want to share a quote, a similar quote by Rumi, and then we're going to just have a little discussion about it. So the quote is, and this is a translation, by the way, because the quote is in Farsi and I can't speak Farsi. So the quote goes, Shariat is like a candle that lights up and shows us the way. Without the candlelight, we can't see the way. But when you start walking on that path, you realize how practical it is. And once you get to the destination, well, that is the truth. So what do you guys think about those two quotes?
In my understanding, I think that the mystic or scholar would represent the candle.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the candle is like meant to light your way, so the mystic poet kind of shows you how, like, the path that you have to take.
I agree, 1,000%. And I think that it really comes back to having that medium that you can find the path through, because it's very difficult to follow any sort of thing without having a teacher or a mentor that teaches you how to do those things.